Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ohio State Primetime Live. I'm your co-host Ryan Stano.
I'm Garrison Gaddy.
Well, Garrison, we've had some. This is right before the spring game. That's when you start to hear about a lot of recruiting news specific to recruiting visits set up here in the spring. I know a lot of prospects are trying to get to campus before spring games. The ones that are still doing spring games, and Ohio State's one of them. Even though it's not technically a true spring game, it'll be a spring showcase. So we've had a few prospects want to schedule a visit, and one of the players to actually schedule a visit actually just happened, in the last couple of days. Five-star tackle Felix Ojo is one of them. He decided to schedule 5 official visits. Ohio State's actually number 2 on that docket. The first visit will actually go to Ole Miss, and then Michigan, Oklahoma, and Texas will follow. He's actually from Texas, so they seem to be the favorites, to start out. But that doesn't mean Ohio State can make a good impression. So, first of all, what are your overall thoughts on Ojo as a prospect?
So for him as a prospect, I believe he's someone who's going to lean more towards the offensive tackle position. Very big guy. I wouldn't say he's as long as someone like Canwell, but he's long arms, athletic on the edge. For me, I think this is huge. I think this is someone that you should want to lock down, someone you need to lock down. For Coach Bowen, I think this is probably one of his more important seasons in his first year at Ohio State. It's important that, and I mean, we've both seen it. We've seen a lot of offensive linemen schedule Ohio State on their visit, including a high-profile guy here like Ojo. And I think that if we're able to get into Ohio State, we're somewhere where we lack depth right now also, which is probably the reason why we've gone after so many offensive linemen, why so many have scheduled dates with us. So I think getting Felix Ojo would be an humongous gift. If this was our top signee coming out of the class, I wouldn't be upset.
Yeah, no, Ojo's a really good player. Like you mentioned, he's big. He's 6'7", he's like 274. Like he's a big dude. And that's why all the big programs want him. I mentioned Ohio State, Michigan, Ole Miss, Oklahoma, Texas. Those are the big boys. And it's interesting that the only 2 northern teams in his immediate recruitment is Ohio State and Michigan. So that tells you, the last 2 national champions. So that tells you, that the recent success is having some staying power with these 5-star recruits. And you mentioned it. A lot of the early visits here for Ohio State have come from offensive linemen. And, we'll get to a couple more here in a second. But I agree with you with Bowen. He was hired off the strength of the fact that he is a recruiting. He is a recruiting guru. Like he was known as more of a recruiter than a developer, and Justin Fry was kind of the other way around. So, and that's part of the reason why Ohio State went ahead and hired a bunch of those offensive analysts, like we talked about last week. A lot of those guys have been offensive line coaches before, so they can help Bowen with the development side of being a coach. Bowen has shown he can be a great recruiter. He's already gone out, and Ojo's visiting the last weekend in May. So it's that May 30th, June 1st window. So, Ohio State's second on those visits. I don't know how strong of a possibility it is to go ahead and, shut down his recruitment after a visit to Ohio State. He's got 3 more scheduled, but we'll have to see how some of the other visits go with these other offensive linemen. And one of the other guys, we mentioned, you mentioned Jackson Cantwell, and he is the top dog for the 2026 class. Yeah. He is a 5-star recruit, not just the top tackle in the country, but he's the number 1 overall recruit in the composite. And he's someone that Ohio State would love to get. He is another big guy. He is 6'8", 300 pounds. He's from Missouri, so, Missouri is on his list. But, he's already scheduled a visit for Ohio State. He'll be coming in here actually next month in March. So Ohio State gets a chance to make an early impression on him before the spring game. And I know both, if you have the same line of thought that I do, we would both love to have Cantwell get on campus as soon as possible and try to lock him down. What are your thoughts on him?
Can't miss player. I think that I'm sharing his highlights here from Huddle. Everyone, if you want to take a look at this, he's one of those guys. I believe, there's pillar recruits that you can have in your class, guys that I would say look down from the top of the mountain, but they hold up the rest of the class. If you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I think Jackson Cantwell is one of those guys. I think he's someone that if you get him into the program, unless you have an elite guy already at left tackle or a guy that's real elite at right tackle, he's someone that can come in right away and play for your program. I don't care where it is. I don't care if you're talking UTEP all the way to Ohio State. He's someone that can play there. There's a lot of other suitors for him right now that are big players in college football, whether that be in NIL, whether that be just in terms of the development that has come from their program in specific positions. When it comes to Ohio State, you mentioned it. Bowen his recruiting acumen is very good, and we have him somewhere right where we need him. Again, we talked about plenty of times how he has not coached the offensive line position some time now, almost 10 years basically. We do have a bunch of analysts that are there. I think that's why they can help the development, help the recruiting process. But I think that having him there, recruiting someone like Jackson Cantwell is huge.
Well, and I also think that, not just with Cantwell, but Ojo, some of the other guys who are scheduling visits already, I think it's big that just recently on this national championship run, Donovan Jackson showed what can happen when you are a versatile offensive lineman to come through Ohio State. He started left guard. All of a sudden, the offensive line gets thrown into chaos because of injuries, and he ends up possibly being a better tackle prospect than he was a guard. So, if you show that Ohio State is a place where you can go and develop offensive linemen, the top offensive linemen are going to want to come there. And Cantwell is someone, he kind of reminds me, he's bigger than Paris Johnson, but he was the same caliber of recruit. Now, Paris Johnson was a 5-star recruit. He's the last 5-star offensive line recruit Ohio State's had. And he was someone who was able to, play multiple different positions. Now, Cantwell, he protects better than Paris Johnson Jr., and he is someone, like you mentioned, who could start at either tackle spot from day one. And he's good enough to start at left tackle, quite frankly. Love to get him. We'll see what happens. Obviously he's going to have all of the big dogs on him. And this is something that Ohio State's going to have to determine how they're going to use their NIL money, because they're not going to, they don't have unlimited funds, and they're probably, we've just talked about 2 5-star offensive line recruits that they're going to have to go. They're probably going to have to throw their funds at just one of them. They're probably not going to be able to land both if you want to have other top-level guys at other positions in this class. So, that's something that they have to figure out with their NIL donations. And, that's part of Mick Marotti's job. He's going to have to, and Pantone, Pantone's really going to have to figure out how to manage this roster. He's the GM for a reason. So it's going to be interesting to see how they spend that money.
Do you believe he will be the highest earner of the class? If he were to be, yeah.
Are you talking just Ohio State's class or this 2026 class in general?
In Ohio State's class, if he were to commit, say at the end of this, by the end of the year, do you think he would be the highest? That he would have the most money out of it?
I think so, just because of the guys that we've seen who Ohio State's interested in. They already have Chris Henry Jr. locked down. Obviously, he's got a certain amount of NIL money anyway, but he committed to Ohio State pretty darn early, even before NIL became a thing. He has been locked in with Brian Hartline for a while. So I think as long as Hartline stays, he's not leaving. And I even think he would be willing to take less NIL money to surround himself with some pretty darn good players on offense. So unless there is, unless they end up landing a stud, and I'm talking stud, quarterback. And right now, looking at who they're in on, I don't really see them spending that kind of money I'm saying top shelf money on a quarterback that would be better spent, quite frankly. You know, they were in on Jared Curse for a little bit. I know he's still, you know, he's projected to go to Georgia. I know they've got a shot to take him, you know, away, but I wouldn't say that's a done deal by any means. And quite frankly, I would rather lock down a left tackle when you've got a quarterback in Julian Sand and Tavian St. Clair, you know, already in the pipeline. You know, St. Clair's a 5-star recruit already. So I think he probably would be the higher center. What do you think?
I agree with you. I mean, I'm looking at it right here. I mean, out of all the guys I see on here, I mean, outside of Chris Henry Jr., I couldn't imagine anyone else getting a higher bid, especially because knowing who else is going after Canwell around the country, the money is going to be there. At that point, it's about what else do you offer from a player perspective, from a program perspective, from a community perspective, things like that. Do the parents get along with him, with the coaches, things of that nature. At this point, I don't even think money's even a thing for him, but I do believe that if he were to sign with Ohio State, he would obtain the most NIL money.
Sure. And I mean, you look at some of the other like top prospects that they, you know, could go in on as far, you know, that could end up garnering that extra money. I mean, like you mentioned, they've already got Chris Henry Jr. and a 5-star wide receiver. The other top receivers, you know, I know, you know, they've been Caden Dixon-White, you know, they've been in on, you know, he's a 4-star guy. I don't think I think that they have enough at other positions, specifically on offense as well, where they would feel more comfortable shelling out a large amount of money for an offensive lineman as opposed to, you know, a wide receiver where they've already got a stable of guys, a quarterback where they've already got two 5-star quarterbacks on the roster, you know, running back, they've been pretty good in the transfer portal there. So I think if they're going to allocate money, you know, a ton of money on offense to be an offensive line, and we'll see which offensive lineman it ends up being.
Do you would you had rather that Caden Dixon-White had taken his visit during the same time as Chris Henry Jr., or do you think it's better that they do it separately?
I don't think it matters because of how damn good of a recruiter Brian Hartline is. You know, if he comes to you and say, "Hey, we want you to be part of the next great wide receivers at Ohio State," that's a serious. I mean, you got to listen. And he can just sit there in his office and just list all of the first-round wide receivers he's coached. Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, Marvin Harrison Jr. He's got one on the roster right now, Jeremiah Smith. We'll see where Emeka Egbuka ends up getting drafted. You know, he can just – Jackson Smith and Jigba. Again, I mean, he's got so many of those guys. And what he could say is, hey, now I'm running the show. I'm calling the plays. And if you want to get the ball a lot, you want to show NFL teams that you can not only run routes well, catch the ball, and, you know, put up numbers, but do the little things like blocking. You know, all Ohio State wide receivers are extremely good blockers in the run game. And, you know, we'll see. I don't think it really truly matters, to be honest with you. I mean, Chris Henry Jr. will probably recruit the hell out of him too, but I have faith in Hartline to lock anyone down that he really wants to get.
Another guy I have written down here that I'm really interested in, two of them, Blaine Bradford and Braylon Womack, two highly talented safeties in this 2026 recruiting class. Womack coming in June 20th, Bradford coming in a week before, June 13th. For those two guys right there, I'm high on them as most people are.
Bradford is really good. Yeah. I mean, looking at his highlights.
Yeah. He reminds me of Caleb Downs. That's exactly who he reminds me of. I think those two are huge. Just looking at the safety position right now, the whole secondary as a whole. The safety position specifically, I think that the depth there could be better in terms of just the not that we don't have guys there to fill positions, but in terms of just the peak of their talent. I mean, I think that probably our second or third guy next year, if you want to count the nickel as safety, is going to be someone like Lorenzo Styles, right? And
Yeah,
then
which or
McLean,
or it could be Jalen McLean, who I
it
know
could
they
be.
like.
Well, yeah, and I actually expect McLean to be back there with
With
not
Downs.
Lorenzo, but with Downs. The
Yeah.
thing is, though, is that even though we have high expectations from McLean, we
Yep.
have guys like Styles who have, well, I guess you can really just say a year of playing the safety position because he was a wide receiver over at Notre Dame, a starting wide receiver at Notre Dame. I think it's very important that we get some highly touted guys. If not, then we get because I would assume we can only get probably one or two of these guys. I don't think we're gonna get both of them.
No. I don't think they're getting them both. Although, Walton ended up. I know different position group, but Walton lined up some pretty good corners last year. Getting a couple of those 5-star guys. But if I had to choose between those two, I would choose Bradford. I mean, he's the number 1 safety in the class, 5-star kid. He's really good. I know you said he reminds you of Caleb Downs. Caleb Downs is pretty hallowed ground so far, so I'm not going to quite go that far.
I mean, as a player, not that he's that. I mean, just like how he plays.
Sure.
Yeah.
And he's a really good player in his own right. I think that Matt Guerrieri will really see what kind of recruiter he can be specific to what Matt Patricia wants to do with the defense, because Matt Patricia, he runs multiple defenses. We don't know what his base is going to be yet. We assume it's going to be a 4-3, but we don't know. We'll see how he wants to recruit, because if he wants, hey, I'm going to be more linebacker heavy than we've been in the past, maybe they'll throw more resources recruiting linebackers. If they want to keep nickel guys out there, then they'll throw more guys trying to get more corners. And if they want to have 3 safeties out there, like Knowles had at one point, they can do that too. But the problem for me with Bradford is, he's from Baton Rouge and LSU is hot and heavy on him. So it's going to take a lot of work to get him. And, obviously, again, all the big boys after him too. I mean, Oregon, Bama, Notre Dame, and Ohio State, obviously. So it's going to be interesting to see if they're going to be able to lock down, him or one of those guys. What concerns me with Bradford is Ohio State, like, they have the second to last visit, but the last visit's home with LSU. So that's concerning.
Were there any other guys that you were looking at? I have one more if you don't.
Yeah. I am really interested to see, we've already talked about a couple of them, the offensive line recruiting, because Ohio State keeps setting up visits with these guys. And, we've already talked about Ojo. We've already talked about Cantwell. But there's another guy who actually has Ohio State, in his final list of schools. And that's Samuel Roseborough. And, Sam Roseborough, he is the 8th best offensive lineman in the 2026 class. He's from Florida. All the big guys are out, after him too. And his final list of schools, he's got Ohio State, obviously, Florida, LSU, Georgia, Texas, Michigan, Florida State, Penn State, Texas A&M, and Alabama. So, he hasn't, super finalized his list yet. But, again, you're swimming with the big boys. So, it's going to be interesting to see if Ohio State is going to be able to get some of these guys. And they've got a lot of local kids too. Like, they've got 3 or 4 kids from the state of Ohio. I know we had talked about that a couple of weeks ago as well, that they're looking at. So, I'm very encouraged that Bowen has already come in and lined up, a bunch of visits and guys that are interested in Ohio State, when Justin Fry seemed to struggle to get kids interested. So.
Yeah, I mean, another name we haven't even said, not as highly ranked as these guys, but Drew Evers, another offensive lineman who gave his visits yesterday.
Yep.
I'm really encouraged. Ohio State's offensive line play, it hasn't been terrible, let's say, over the last few years. It hasn't been god awful, but there's been a lot of.
That's the problem.
Yeah, Yeah, exactly. That's a good way to say it. And for a lot of us fans who are watching, and we see the recruiting, we see the lack of depth. At Ohio State, that should never be a thing. I mean, maybe I'm crazy for saying this, but I don't think a lack of any position should be a lack of depth at any position at Ohio State should be a problem, right?
No, you're right.
Especially something like offensive line, and I'm really encouraged by this from Tyler Bowen. I think that he's going to be the guy for the job. I think that he's going to lead this offensive line to where it needs to be, whether it be recruiting, scouting, development, and so on, play on the field. And again, this is just a first step for it, and I don't want to judge him too heavily off this first signing class. It's his first time. He just got hired, but I think he got hired at the right time. So
yeah, no, I agree. And, I'm as well as Ohio State seems to be pushing the offensive side of recruiting. I'm interested to see how the defensive side goes with Patricia as the DC. And, it's good. Bradford, you mentioned he's already got a visit. We've got a couple safeties who have already scheduled visits, but we haven't really seen a whole lot else. And as we have talked multiple times, it's time Larry Johnson stopped holding Ohio State hostage, because there's no defensive line. Like, they're silent on that front. Like, they're not really, just crickets. And until Johnson resolves his, I guess, future, that's probably going to stay the same. So, as well as Ohio State seems to be pushing with the offensive side of the ball in recruiting, the defensive side, I'm a little worried. I mean, it's very early, but it's very early in the class, and with how last year started, Ohio State, like, they came out with game busters last year. In April they got a bunch of 5-star recruits, and then they weren't able to hold all of them. So I would rather finish strong than start strong.
Yeah, so I do share a little bit of concern defensively when it comes to recruiting. Most of that is only because the defensive coordinator, the head guy, the head honcho, I don't know how he's going to do in that facet of the job. I don't know if he even wants to do that job. But of course, he's going to have to some extent. At the same time, though, I do believe that one of the reasons the hire is okay is that I don't need you to do it much. I don't need you to do much. You got one of the top recruiters at safety and corner. You got one of the top recruiters at linebacker. You got one of the. I mean, at the end of the day, Larry Johnson is still one of the top recruiters at the defensive line. As much as sometimes we may bitch and moan about it, he is that. So I think with that being said, that kind of shies me from being too worried. But there is a little bit of me that says, like, okay, well, can Patricia go into these families' homes? Because there's gonna be visits where he's got to show up. The same way Ryan Day showed up to the most important visits, Matt Patricia has to do that. So and then also just when it comes to Matt Patricia, him seeking out the kids that can play in his system and play in his scheme. Does he know how to? I mean, it's one thing for your general manager to go out for you to do it when you're in the NFL. It's another thing for you to do it and you to go out and seek the players that can do that for you. So,
and that's also part of it is we still don't know what kind of scheme he's going to run. He hasn't really. Ohio State just made the official announcement of all their hires like last week. So I'm interested to see what style he wants to run for the personnel that he has, because the personnel that he has is obviously built around the 4-2-5 base scheme. So I think that'll also determine what kind of recruits he's able to get.
Now, question for you, this last person I wanted to talk about here, Bo Bentley, top 10 quarterback in the 2026 class. He has set his visits, plans on going to Oklahoma on March 8th, LSU on March 15th, Ohio State on the 19th, and Florida State and Georgia Tech after that. Any thoughts on him?
Yeah, I mean, he is someone who Ohio State, like in this particular class, since they were able to get Tavian St. Clair, I don't think they're necessary. Like, I don't think Ryan Day's first priority is to grab like a 5-star, like one of the top guys out of this class. I think they're okay with, all right, let's get someone who's still really good, but
Yeah.
someone who, might not necessarily be one of those top billing guys. And that's kind of what Bentley is. I mean, he's a nice player. He's a little, I mean, I wouldn't say short. Like, he's not short by any means. I mean, he's still 6'2", he's 200 pounds. But he's not, St. Clair, who's, 6'4", 245, like, built.
Right.
He's
Not many are.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's why he's a 5-star recruit.
Yeah.
I like his, like, he's got good touch for a high school quarterback. He doesn't have like this super strong arm, but he is someone who's also pretty fast. Like, he was an anchor on his high school's relay team. So he's someone who can move. And if Brian Hartline wants a quarterback who is a little bit more mobile for what he wants to do with the offense in the future, maybe this is someone that they look at. And I think that's a large part of it, is what Hartline wants to do with his offense. So, I'm interested to see if they're able to get someone who's a little bit more of a dual threat, or someone who's more of a pocket passer, like Stan in St. Clair.
Yeah, I'm looking at it right here. Like 47 or passing touchdowns, 7 interceptions, 923 rushing yards, 3,200 passing yards, 16 rushing touchdowns. I mean, he's a dual threat. That's exactly what it is. And it's been a while since Ohio State has had I wouldn't call Will Howard a pure dual threat quarterback. It's been a while since we've had
probably him. Justin Fields is the last guy.
Yeah, and I mean, hell, we barely ran the ball with him. I mean, what he did
his
2 years ago,
his senior year, they were afraid to get him hurt.
But I mean, what he did 2 years ago in the NFL, we didn't see we didn't see none of that at Ohio State. And if we did, I think I'm probably even more bullish about both our 2020 takes, but against Alabama. But I think Bentley is exactly what you said he is. I think that he's not to the same extent, but he's kind of like a Lincoln Keenholz, where you have a guy that came over before him, is somewhat established, but you got to. I will always say this: you have to get a quarterback. I don't care what star he is, but you got to get a quarterback in every single class. And if you can, you get a highly rated quarterback, an elite quarterback in every single class. They might leave. Who cares? Someone's gonna stay. So, I mean, hell, we just saw that with Ohio State. We have Aaron Nolan, we have Julian Sand. Someone's got to go. Someone leaves, and whoever's left there, cool. I mean, if Julian Sand had left and Aaron Nolan had to stay, I wouldn't be crying. I wouldn't be upset about it.
Yeah.
So
no, agreed. And I mean, Devin Brown did the same thing. He just left, after the season too.
Yeah.
So, I think I agree with you. I mean, and that's been Ryan Day's philosophy since he's been the head coach. Like, he wants to have a quarterback in every recruiting class, which I think is the correct way to do things. And they kind of treat it like the wide receiver room, like kind of throw you in the fire. Whoever's best is going to get playing time. And, if you decide, if you end up not being the best and you want to transfer, no hard feelings. Like, that's fine.
No, I think Ryan Day has done a really good job of running this. Like, from recruiting to on the field, he's done a really good job of running this team almost like an NFL team. Listen, if you want your spot, you go earn it. We're going to be drafting guys every year. Only in college, we're drafting a lot of guys. And over the next 2 years, it's your job to keep your job. So, no, I'm happy with the recruiting right now. I'm happy with what's going on, and I look forward to seeing how it finishes out.
I've got a question for you, while we're still here on the recruiting front, because it ties in a little bit. So with the new rules that, there's not really going to be any walk-ons, and rosters basically are expanding in that way. So now they're going to have like 125 guys on a roster. Do you think that Ohio State is going to start filling up the roster with more guys from high school, or are they going to do it more in the transfer portal? Or do you think they're not going to fill up the roster at all, or kind of keep it how they have been with, 85, 90 guys?
I think they're still going to run it through recruiting. I always believe that recruiting is the lifeblood of college football and the backbone. I don't believe like you can win teams just going through the portal, but I do believe the portal can be used. No, that can be. It is useful when you're talking about grabbing guys in positions of need and places where you probably do not have a lot of depth. Guys that can be right away contributors. I think that Signetti figured out. I think he's the actual first person to figure out how to do recruiting and the portal correctly. A lot of people.
What was interesting about him was he took all of his old players. Like he grabbed them, like 13 of them from James Madison and brought them over with him.
Yeah, but there were still other guys around. Like I think he probably got I think it was something like 30 or 40 from his team, and like another 20 or so out of the portal. And I think and the guys that he grabbed out of the portal were not. It was like 15 guys outside of the JMU, and the guys that he grabbed all had proven production. Before that, over the last 2 years, we saw a lot of guys go up to the big names and do things of that nature. And of course, you can't be lucky like Ohio State and go and get a Caleb Downs out of the transfer portal. Most of the top end guys are not coming out of the transfer portal. So at that point, what are you looking for then? You should be looking for guys that have played the game. You don't want to get guys who were 5 stars 2 years ago and have produced nothing. Like if you asked me, if you told me there was a 3-star guy or a 2-star guy who had been playing at Western Michigan, who over the last 2 seasons has accumulated 1,800 receiving yards and 15 touchdowns, and then there was a 5-star guy who has been playing the first 2 seasons of college football and has produced maybe 100 yards at the most. I'm taking the 3-star guy who's been playing football at Western Michigan.
Well, honestly, I mean, the perfect example to what you're trying to say, Ohio State did that with their left tackle position. They went down to Rice, and they grabbed Ethan Onuwa. And, he's probably going to be the starting left tackle, someone who wasn't very highly recruited, but has developed into a really good player with proven production, as you mentioned. And now he has a chance to kind of fill that new Josh Simmons role, come in as a transfer left tackle and possibly leave as a first-round pick. So, yeah, I agree.
Same thing with Daniels. I mean,
difference is at least he was at a Big Ten school. Like he played a little bit higher level of football.
Yeah. Well, before we go to the next subject here, everyone, nice. We have a script here for the read from Mark Rogers and the Voice of College Football Network. Get your business, product, service, or personal brand to the next level by partnering with the Voice of College Football. Let's discuss how you also can reach your target market. Check out the experience of one of our current partners. And as you see posted on the screen, we are here to deliver for you. Contact us at sponsorships at bocfb.com today.
Absolutely. So there's something else that I wanted to talk to you about, and it's this expansion thing that's been kind of happening here between the Big Ten and the SEC, and they seem to be running the show. And neither one of us, as we've talked about in the past, are in favor of what they're trying to do.
Right.
But it seems like it's inevitable to happen. And it seems like they're passing around either a 14 or a 16 team expansion. Which of those two would you prefer? Like both of us think it's bad, but which is the lesser evil in your mind?
You said between the 14 and 16?
Between the 14 and 16.
I think the 16 is the one less evil.
Okay, why?
When I looked at some of the teams that were ranked around there this season, such as South Carolina, I think those teams, if you're telling me that some of these other teams are going to get into the 14, knowing that just because you're ranked higher, that doesn't mean you're better than the other team. I'm okay with it. Just don't let it get to 20.
That's probably where they're going. But, I pulled up here some of the so on social media, they've been going back to see, the Big Ten and the SEC proposed model, where it would be 4 from the Big Ten, 4 from the SEC, and then 2 from the other conferences, and then 1 of the group of 5. if they were going to do a, excuse me, change it into a different model. If they do that, the 2022 season, Purdue would have made the college football playoff. Like, Purdue.
Yeah.
I think we need to I think the Big Ten needs to reconsider. I think the other conferences need to make sure that this is something that is pushed back upon, that doesn't really happen, because if the Big Ten and the SEC aren't careful, they're just going to water down their own product that they're trying to make better. And I understand it. Like, I understand their motivations. Like, obviously, more teams in the college football playoff means more revenue for them that they can share around.
Mm-hmm.
And that's obviously what this all boils down to, is just money. But I don't personally want to see a matchup of Purdue and Alabama where Alabama roasts them, by 40 in a first-round playoff game. That does not interest me as a college football fan. And I don't think it interests a lot of college football fans. So, but, to kind of answer my own question, I would actually prefer the 14-team model.
Mm-hmm.
And that's strictly because you keep it a little bit more exclusive, and you prevent a little bit of what I just said. You prevent a little bit more of that watered down product. I mean, like in the 14-team model, like let's say that would have happened this year. If you just, go straight off the rankings, Miami, you get in, you get a chance, and then Ole Miss, we'll see what happens with you. So those are, if you're going to have to expand the playoff, that's going to be the limit that, that's where I guess I draw the line, would be 14 teams as opposed to 16, even though it'll probably end up being 16 anyway.
So, here, I'll just put it this way. I'm still somewhat of a purist of this game, right?
Yeah.
I'm vehemently against automatic bids outside of winning your own conference. I think that ruins the sport, and also just simply because of this. Let's say the SEC and the Big Ten each get 4 teams, and let's say it's a 14 team, right? You're talking over 50% of the playoff being from 2 conferences, mind you. Let's say the 4th place team of the Big Ten is 9-3, and there's a team that's 10-2. Well, I mean, I don't understand why that 4th place team gets an automatic bid. I would say the same thing for Ohio State this season. If they were the 4th team, and mind you, we're the 4th team in the Big Ten this season because we lost a game we should never lost, and the 2 teams ahead of us, 2 of the teams ahead of us, we beat. Yeah. But I will stay here and tell you, Ohio State should not have an automatic bid simply because you are in the Big Ten. Everyone, there's an acronym for that in today's world, everybody. There's literally an acronym for that in today's world. So
and you talk about, how in that scenario, Ohio, Big Ten and the SEC would have would have 50% of the bracket. This year was actually both conferences was over 50% of the bracket, because Big Ten got 4, SEC got 3. I think the way they did it was correct. Like, I don't have qualms with who they chose. I think that was probably the correct order. But to your point, like if there's a year where some of the Big Ten just, absolutely stinks, then that's going to be a problem or the SEC, quite frankly, like either conference. That's going to be a problem for me when there are going to be other teams from other conferences that deserve it. Yeah. And again, we're you and I are talking from a purely college football fan standpoint, and that's unfortunately who these conferences and power brokers in college football seem to listen to the least. They don't seem to care. They seem to care only about what lines their checkbook, how much money they can bring in, and that's that.
Yeah, and I'm just thinking about this. I mean, what? So, if you win the ACC, and also I want to say this. I also want to say this. with this being known now, what's being done to the ACC and the Big 12, I think, is horrendous.
Yep.
I think those two conferences are prominent conferences in college football. There's not a Big Two. There's there's Power Four conference. There's Power Four. And I think especially in the ACC, I think there's a lot of valuable programs there. And I'm not just talking about Miami. I'm not just talking about Clemson. Not just Florida State. I think Virginia Tech is important to college football. I think programs like Syracuse are important to college football. I think programs like Virginia are important to college football. You go down to the Big 12. People like to hate them, but we see what's going on with this resurgence of Colorado football. You got Iowa State down there, who over the last 10 years, Iowa State has had their ups and downs. But man, when they're up, and it's fun to watch them and see it as a college football purist and fan. You still got other. Who's else down there? Cincinnati's down there now. I don't like what's happening to them. And then my next question is like, okay, well, does the winner of the ACC and the Big 12 get that bye that the SEC and the Big 10 do? Yeah. So where are these other Big 10 schools, SEC schools being ranked?
I don't know. And I mean, I know I mentioned, Purdue in the 2022 season. Just so everyone knows, like, they finished that season. They ended up playing the Big Ten championship that year because they still had divisions, and it was the Big Ten West. Mm-hmm. They finished their season, including their bowl game after that, 8-6. They lost 6 games. That would be a team that would be in the college football playoff. Subtract their bowl game, they would have been 8-5 going into the college football playoff. Like, there's no business with a team being that bad being the college football playoff. I don't care if it's from the Big Ten. I like the Big Ten. Obviously, Ohio State plays in the Big Ten. But that is just, honestly, that's just pissing on college football. Like, college football fans, like, you're going to make them sit through a Purdue when they've got 5 losses in the college football playoff? Like, give me a break.
What is we're going to give an automatic bid for a 14th place team?
Yeah. I mean,
I just, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's stupid. I get why it's happening. The money, I truly get it. Listen, man, I'm a capitalist. I'm okay with it, but don't do it to the detriment of the sport.
Agreed. Although, had it been around in the 2019 season, when Ohio State was obviously really good, it would have been interesting to see because Ohio State and Penn State would have made it, and then Wisconsin and Minnesota would have been the other 2 teams.
What season was that?
That was 2019. That was PJ Fleck's first year when Minnesota won 11 games.
Yeah.
That would have been kind of interesting to see. But again, most years, and I think this is what the Big Ten is going to, and the SEC are going to say, and they're going to count on, be like, look, both of our conferences are so big now with so many premier teams that we're not going to have any stinkers. Like, the 4 teams that we put in, they're going to be good. Yeah. Because now we've got Oregon, USC, Washington, UC, like all these teams added in the SEC. Now we've got Texas and Oklahoma, 2 blue blood programs. So we're not going to stink. And because our conferences are so big, our conferences are so much better than everyone else's. So we deserve those bids. And I don't necessarily agree with that. And I know there's a lot of people out there that don't agree with that as well. But that's just kind of the system that they've set up for themselves to make this happen. And again, we talked about this last week. I would actually prefer, if they're going to change anything, change the seeding, that we had last year. Like, there's no reason Boise State should be getting a bye. Arizona State, maybe, but certainly not Boise State. So I think there are other issues they could be fixing within the playoff as opposed to trying to expand the format already and, kind of rig it for themselves.
I mean, and maybe you can give some clarity on this. Maybe or maybe you don't. But say if you got this season 4? How many Big Ten teams made it this year?
This year it was 4. It was Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and IU.
Yeah. What
SEC,
happened?
It was Bama. I'm sorry, it was not Bama. It was Tennessee, Georgia, and Texas.
So what happens I mean, if you have 4 making the top 12, I mean, I would highly doubt some way a team would be a fifth place team would be that highly ranked in a
No.
conference. But the only reason I ask is because of this. If you look at some of the current Big Ten schedules, I think we all assume Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State are going to have really good seasons, right? Now let's say look, man, there's a chance that Michigan has a really good season too. And then if you look at someone like Illinois, where their schedule is screaming 11-1, 10-2.
Illinois is an interesting case because their schedule, it's not a complete cakewalk like Michigan's is next year, at least in the Big Ten portion of it. But it's still pretty easy. Like their big non-con game is Duke. I wouldn't say that's too tough. IU is going to be much worse this year. They play them, and they get at IU. They do have to play Ohio State. They do have to play at Washington, but they get USC at home. They got to go at Wisconsin as well, though. So I still think they could lose, 3 or 4 games depending on how everything shakes out.
I mean, they bring back, I think, 74% of their.
That's where I was going to go. Is they bring back a ton of guys, like a ton of guys.
The quarterback.
So I think it's definitely possible that they can do something like that.
Yeah.
And are you trying to say there's a chance the Big Ten gets 5 teams in the playoff next year? Because I'm not going to go there.
I know for a fact. Well, I don't know what Penn State's going to look like next year. At least quarterback wise.
Penn State's still going to be really good.
Yeah, I think next year. I know. I'm going to say that next year I know for a fact that Ohio State, Michigan, and Oregon are making it.
I see. I would say for a fact. I would say Ohio State, Penn State, and Oregon. I don't know for a fact that Michigan's going to get there, even though their schedule's so easy. Just because.
Are you talking about this upcoming season?
Yes, this upcoming season.
Okay, I thought we were talking about like a during a 14 team. Okay.
I mean, even in a 14-team playoff, I
think they'll be really good.
I would still guarantee Penn State over Michigan in any format next year. Next
season. Okay, I'm thinking about 27 when the 14 team will come in. But if you're talking about next season,
yeah, I think it's pretty hard to project that far.
Yeah, it's Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State. It is, and I mean, again, I have Michigan at 9-3 right now. We'll see how that works out. Illinois, I had them at 10-2 right now.
I do think there's a chance that there's 4 Big Ten teams in again next year. My most likely, subjects are Ohio State, Oregon, Penn State, and Michigan, just because they don't. I mean, Ohio State has to play both Penn State and Michigan, but Oregon avoids both Ohio State and Michigan. Like there's all 3. Honestly, of any team, Ohio State's got the toughest schedule because they got to play Texas too.
Yeah.
So, Michigan's schedule is a cakewalk, but we don't know what they're going to do at the quarterback position, and that's the big thing for me. And I know, I know we mentioned this last week with the Collins show. I don't know when the sanctions are going to come. The actual penalties. There could be some stuff that happens. This season that stuff could come down this summer. We just don't know the timeline on that, and that could derail their season too.
Most definitely.
So is there anything else you want to cover here before?
We can real quick. You can go over some of the spring news. We hear some good things about 3 young guys: Devin Sanchez, Riley Pettyjohn, and Tavian Sinclair. Mick Mariotti, he talked. He specifically Devin Sanchez. He's a dude's dude. Said about all of them actually. The dudes. They've been busting their ass in there, and that made me happy because so as someone who played college football prior, a long time ago. Oh my God, a long time ago now. When you come in as a freshman, especially that early, I mean, when I was playing D2, I didn't come in until early summer. But you get in there early before the spring, you don't see your coaches. You don't see them at all. You're there with Mick, and you're working out with your teammates. And if that's the first time you get to impress the guys around you, because it's more impressive to. It's much better to impress your teammates than it is your coaches, because the guys the guys that you work with, the guys you're in the war room with, the guys that you watch film with, you study with, you shower with, those are the guys that you want to impress. And I think the fact that those three guys specifically, who I think will all be future leaders at Ohio State on the football field, I'm very glad to see that they are being recognized early for their work. Hard work.
I agree. No, you know how I feel about Devin Sanchez. I think he's someone who's got a chance to start from day one and play a lot of snaps early. It'll be interesting to see how St. Clair does in the quarterback battle. And Ohio State might be adding 2 starters at linebacker, depending on what Patricia wants to do with the defense. 4-3 is his base. I was going to get to this comment here in a section. I thought that was pretty funny. So Petty John's got a chance to play a lot, in the future here as well. But back to CJ's suggestion here for the sanction. I actually think that's pretty humorous, and it's also kind of funny. As far as like that kind of would fit the crime.
No, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. Yeah.
I wouldn't mind that at all. But I mean, as far as those other, those 3 freshmen impressing, that's good to see. And it's obviously they haven't done really any on-field work yet. They're just, in the weight room putting in some work. But here in a few weeks, we'll start to get some on-the-field reports, and then we can really dive in and see who is actually going to be a real playmaker next season of guys that we might not be thinking about. And there's really, just one other piece of news that I came across that I wanted to talk about. And I saw it was a very brief clip I saw of, here local in Columbus, Adam King from 10 TV. He actually was interviewing wide receiver Carnell Tate at a crew game. And he was asked, so, I mean, what happened to all these rumors that you were going to leave? Like, where did those come from? And Tate was like, I have no idea. Like, I love Ohio State. I don't even know why those rumors, popped up, but I want to stay in Columbus. So that was good to see. There was a lot of talk about how other teams were trying to poach Tate, poach some of the other receivers, and a lot of tampering involved. So, it's good to see that Tate's locked in with Ohio State.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was worried, man. I was worried that he might go to Oregon. I'm not gonna lie to you. Guy's old lady over there. One of my favorite quotes from Colin Cowherd: 3 things make smart men dumb: money, sports, and women. Yep. And it makes me very happy that Carnell Tate is, he's a very smart, bright young man. Who's gone through a lot. People, if you don't know about his story, go check it out. But I'm happy he's a Buckeye because I've seen a lot of lists lately. And I'm a big list guy, and sometimes I like to purposely rile myself up. I'm kind of like Michael Jordan. I just gotta find something to get the juices flowing, find a competitive edge. And when I see that Carnell Tate is not in top 10 list of the best receivers in college football, I gotta see some two Georgia Tech wide receivers on the list ahead of them. My God, man! I think Carnell Tate. I told you that I believe that by season end, Mylan Graham, we might talk about him being the second best receiver on this team skill wise.
Yeah,
I'm gonna backtrack on it for a second because I had no idea that the national media was this stupid. I mean, hell, I remember back in I think it was 2021, and Rich Eisen, well-known Michigan fan. This was after none of the receivers, Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, and JSN, none of them got voted to be one of the top 3 finalists for the Bednarik Award. And it was one of Rich's funny. It was really funny. He was talking about, he was like thanking the national media for giving Ohio State that extra juice they needed to beat Michigan. Which, in all seriousness, those three wide receivers performed very well in that game. CJ shot 390 yards.
All those guys could have been Biletnikoff finalists.
Yeah, but I look at it the same way. If you want to feed a guy who has been a huge contributor in the best position room in the country, by all means, go ahead. Well, did Cardinal State start his sophomores? He didn't start last year.
No. Last year he was a freshman. This year he's a sophomore. So
he played a good amount for as a freshman. So I mean, and then this year, you come out. Jeremiah Smith is on the team. You got Emeka Egbuka, one of the most prolific wide receivers in Ohio State history, on your team. Still come out with 700 yards.
I think Tate's, still a really good player, and we've talked about how we think he would probably be a number one on a lot of other teams out there. A lot of other programs would love to have Tate out there, and I'm just glad that he's locked in with Ohio State. And he knows his opportunities are going to go up now that Egbuka.
Oh yeah.
So, and with the fact that they're gonna have so much attention paid to Jeremiah Smith, like with what he did this year. Teams are going to load up on Smith. They're going to take a playbook. They're going to take a page out of what Texas did, quite frankly. They're going to try to lock Smith up as much as possible and make everyone else beat them and kind of make, the run beat them. Yeah. And Tate, I think, is going to feast on that. Him and Brendan Innes.
I'm excited, man. Every time I think about this wire, I truly believe this is if 2020. Well, it's 2020. 2027 isn't. Until we get to 2027, I think this is going to be Brian Harlan's best receiver unit that he's had. I truly believe that in terms of the top end and the depth of it.
I'm not quite going to go that far yet, just because he did have a wide receiver room that included Olave, Wilson, JSN, and Marvin Harrison Jr. Like those, they were
that's
all
4 guys. That's 4 guys.
Yeah. And they're all first-round picks.
I think every single one of these guys can. Maybe not. Brandon Innes is a maybe. I don't know. Maybe not Brandon Innes because of his.
I think Tate is a maybe also, just because he doesn't have prototypical size.
It depends on what we see this season. Well, he's 6'2", 6'3".
This year definitely he's got a chance. The thing is with Tate is he hasn't really had the opportunity to show off everything that he can do because he's just had too many really good players in front of him.
Yeah.
Like when you've got Marvin Harrison Jr., Emeka Egbuka, Jeremiah Smith, like those are all really darn good players. And I guess Tate is 6'3". He is pretty tall, but I am really, just like you, excited to see what he can do. Then he's going to get more opportunities. Well, if you don't have anything else, go ahead and wrap it up. What'd you say?
No, the only thing I'll say is everyone be sure. Well, we have there's a new show coming March 11th. It's a panel show. It'll be myself and a few names you might know, and Chris Drew, Juck on Bucks from both of them from Minnesota Sports. Also, B Moses from Buckeye Scoop, and then the guys from Best Day Media, Ron, and also Clee Mike, who also ran the post-game show during the season. So be sure to look out for that coming soon in about 2 weeks now. So yeah, outside of that, and if you're not here, I think Mark is Mark still up right now?
I don't know if he is. He might be. I wasn't able to catch it earlier. I mean, I basically got home from work.
Well, yeah, if he might, Jackson might be. He might know. But if you're not, right after this, everyone, you should definitely go check out the state of the boys college football. A lot of good information there. If you want, start from the beginning. But yeah,
absolutely. Well, then we will go ahead and see you guys on Thursday for the Collins Show. Bring your comments, questions, concerns, all that, and we look forward to talking to you on Thursday. OH.
IO.